Okay, let's continue with that demonstration we did for the oxygen safety. Let's just talk about oxygen safety for a little bit. To have a fire, you have to have three things. You have to have oxygen, you have to have a fuel, and you have to have a heat source or a spark. You take one of those things out and the fire will not, it doesn't happen. So our goal is we're putting a lot of oxygen on people and around them. When we put them on an oxygen concentrator, there's a lot of oxygen that spills down, cascades over their clothing, their bedding, and a lot of it goes to waste, honestly, because when they exhale, all of that is waste. And we're really pumping a lot in there. So things that we would normally not think of as fuel become fuel. The bedding, their clothing, skin, hair, you put enough oxygen on it and it'll burn. And it'll burn hot and it'll burn quickly. And these burns are really, really bad. As you saw with that tubing that started on fire, if that were to flare, when somebody's inhaling and that were to flare, they're going to have enough oxygen in their upper respiratory tract for that fire to follow down and get down into their upper respiratory tract and to the top of the lungs. It's going to scorch everything in there super hot, super fast, and they're going to die from that. If they don't, they're going to wish they had, because it is a miserable, miserable way to go. So someone that's smoking, they say, well, you know, if that happens, so be it, I'll die. You know, you get an attitude like that. You know, if it were true that they were the only person that would be affected by this, that would be fine. But they're not the only, they live around people, they live with people. Just two quick stories. At a place I used to work at, they had a lady that would smoke with her oxygen on in bed all the time. They educated her, and the key to it is they documented that education. A while later, they educated her probably 5 or 6 times. She fell asleep one night with a cigarette in her mouth, and the cigarette fell on the bedding and started her bed on fire. She got burnt really bad. Her husband had been drinking that night, didn't wake up. He died in the fire. They lived in their son's basement, burnt the house down. So, and she was one of those, if I die, I die, it's me. Well, the investigation ensued. Why did this house burn down? Well, she had oxygen. They come to the company and say, why did you not educate this person on using their oxygen while they're smoking? And they had multiple entries of saying, we did. And they were off the hook. Now, had they educated them but not documented that, their butt would have been in the sling. Because if it doesn't get written down, you're in trouble. You have got to document your education. If there's someone smoking and you see someone smoking, you need to write on there, educated, do not smoke with this oxygen. And have them initial that education. So there's no way for them to come back and say any different. Because if it didn't get written down, it didn't happen. Mm-hmm. Second story, this happened 3 years ago. An assisted living, a guy was smoking with his oxygen on. It flared on him. He threw it out of his nose because it burned him really bad. He flipped it down, and the oxygen started going through the apartment back through the tubing. Well, he got out, and he actually survived. But this fire that it started, his next door neighbors, an old couple, died from smoke inhalation because of the fire. So facilities are especially bad on this. So you've got to get these people to understand the severity of that. Now, I've never done that demonstration that we just did with the cigarette and the tubing with someone, but if it were bad enough, it probably wouldn't be a bad thing to demonstrate that to them. And if that still didn't get to them, then we'd probably discharge them from service, because they're a risk to themselves and everyone around them and to us in the long run. So they've got to understand that. And some people just can't give up the smokes. They'll smoke no matter what. Now, if they are going to smoke, there is a safe way for them to smoke while they're on oxygen. They have to take their oxygen off before they light up. However, oxygen can stick to your clothing and skin and hair for up to 20 minutes after you take it off. So they can't just pull their oxygen off and light up. they're going to have to wait for at least 20 minutes and then light up. That's the only safe way to do it. They can't. Now, at facilities, I see people in the back of the facility sitting in their wheelchair with their oxygen on, smoking, and the nurse is sitting right by them. It's insane that they will do that. But if you ever see something like that, again, document it, educate, document that education, and cover your hiney. That's the name of the game in this one. Again, we talked a little bit about petroleum-based products. We want heat sources like smoking, open candles, flames, those kinds of things need to be away from the oxygen. That includes your concentrator, your tanks, your tubing. Everything needs about a 10-foot bubble around everything that's oxygen related. So they can't be taking their tanks and storing it by the furnace. They can't be taking their tanks and putting it by their gas fireplace because they want to be warm. They need to be at least 10 feet away from any heat source or open flame. That includes pilot lights on water heaters, all that kind of stuff. So any open flame, 10 feet. The other thing that you've got on the fuel end of things, we talked about petroleum-based products. That's Vaseline, mentholatum, chapsticks, a lot of makeup. Think of a lot of body hair care and stuff. Hairspray. If you've ever taken a match to hairspray, add oxygen to that, and you can imagine how bad it's going to be. Hair curlers and dryers. A salon in a facility, you'll see salons in almost every facility you go into. They are a death trap for an oxygen patient, and they never think of it. The hairspray, the gels they're all alcohol-based. They've got propellants in them, lotions, the fingernail polish, everything in there is meant to burn. And you add oxygen to the mix, it's a bad thing. So those are some of the fuels that some people aren't thinking of, is that hairspray. The electric shaver's got a spark in it. Those kinds of things. They've got to be much more careful than they normally would. So you've got to educate these, at least if they're not smokers, they need to avoid smokers. They need to steer clear of someone that's smoking because they need that 10-foot bubble. So if they're by a smoker, they got to walk around them, kind of thing. If they like candles, try to get something different. Get something they plug in the wall that runs off electricity or something. No open flames. Give them alternatives. But the biggest thing is keeping the open flames and heat sources away, and then talk to them. Make sure you talk to them about the fuel sources like petroleum-based products, because nobody thinks of that. And tell them that 20-minute delay. That 20-minute delay also applies to the nurses and the caretakers of that person, and you, as a delivery guy, you're going to be working with person, you're going to get oxygen on you, and you're going to be at risk for 20 minutes. You're a walking match for 20 minutes after you worked around somebody with oxygen. So be really careful if you're going to be out and about, you're in a place where there might be an open flame or something, you got to be really careful, because your shirts are nylon, which is a petroleum-based product, and your shirt will go up like a torch. So you need to be careful with this, because it can save your life, because you're at risk. You've got a lot of oxygen around you. And on your truck, say one of your tanks were leaking, and you had a lot of oxygen carrying around in your cab. That's why there's no smoking on the vehicles. You shouldn't have any open flames, anything like that. So be really, really careful with oxygen. We take it for granted because it's oxygen. We breathe it every day. We're around it every day. The problem we're here, this is medical grade oxygen. It's highly concentrated, and it does weird things at those concentrations that we're not used to, and bad things can happen. So be really, really careful.